There are just some things that fill me with indescribable joy. Certain things that invoke both emotion and happiness from within me. We all have particular things like that will forever hold in high regard. Things we will cherish forever. 10 years ago, Marvel kicked off a phenomenon with the release of 2008's Iron Man, and saw the beginning of their Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, we have 18 fantastic movies spanning this universe, and very soon a 19th that will change everything. As someone who isn't much of a comics fan, I absolutely love these movies, and no matter how many times I watch them, they never seem to stop being entertaining. And now, in the lead up to Infinity War, I thought I'd look back on the fantastic Marvel Cinematic Universe, and why it's as acclaimed as it is. Before everything goes to hell and I have to spend about a week crying over a fictional superhero. Don't leave me, Tony. I love you. This video has no spoilers for Infinity War, by the way, I promise. At the time of making this video and recording this, I haven't seen it yet. I'm seeing it tonight, so I couldn't spoil it even if I wanted to, which I don't. I did a rewatch of all of the films just before Infinity War came out, as I imagined many others did. Nerds! And I've gained a new appreciation for these films. Somehow, I now love them even more than I already did, with each movie having its own distinct style about it unique to the hero of the story. Superhero movies pre-Iron Man were not great. Some were pretty good, but most were Batman and Robin. Then Kevin Feige showed up and showed the industry who's boss, front-running this new cinematic universe with the fantastic Iron Man. And the rest is history. Not only did Marvel up their own game, they upped the game of every other superhero movie around them. Mostly. I don't know what the hell Sony's been doing.
The guy you work for is an evil person.
I've read quite a bit of Marvel comics, but I just can't get into them. I've tried various series, but the stories are just too convoluted and involved for me to really be interested in them. I don't think they're bad, just not for me. However, this did not change how I felt about the movies. It didn't matter if I hadn't read all the comics. Everyone knows who Iron Man is. And in hindsight, it was probably better that I hadn't read much beforehand. That way, I avoided plot spoilers, and I didn't have to worry about things being accurate to the comics. However, these movies have apparently pleased both fans and non-fans of the comics, which is a very impressive feat. It really goes to show how good Marvel is at making movies. They can make comic book movies that are enjoyable even if you haven't read the source material. What Marvel did is unparalleled in the film industry, having a consistent movie universe with a plot that all of the films and extended TV shows follow, a universe that they all share. It had never been done before on such a large scale, and though there have been several imitators, no one has gotten as far as Marvel. It's remarkable what they've been able to achieve and how far they've come. The movies are entertaining individually, even if you haven't seen any of the films beforehand, but you gain a new appreciation for them when you watch them consecutively. So many minor details that make all of these films feel connected. I really have to appreciate how much attention to detail there is. These are movies handled by people that really care about keeping things consistent. And that's one thing that the MCU is really good at. Consistency. And also, gratuitous shirtless scenes, but mostly consistency. Consistent story, consistent characters, and consistent quality. The films have a perfect balance of humor and action. Each movie has looked fantastic, and the action scenes have always been brilliant and exciting, with stunning visual effects that don't really seem to age. The later films allowed more room for comedy, which would usually be a bad thing, but the MCU manages to make it fit without making it seem too awkward. It's amazing how they've taken all of these wild ideas from the comics and made them work, integrating them into this single ongoing story. I'm no expert on all the things they changed from the source material, as my knowledge of Marvel doesn't go past the Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, or Superhero Squad show, but I love the direction they've taken these concepts in order to make them fit into this story. A lot of people who aren't fans of the film say they are sick of the superhero movie genre, but each MCU film has its own feel and identity. Each one is vastly different, and every single movie has managed to keep me interested. I mean, who would have thought that Ant-Man would have been such an awesome movie? A movie about frickin' Ant-Man, one of the dumbest superhero ideas ever. Even against all odds, they knocked it out of the park with every single, not you, one. With even the most obscure properties receiving fantastic movie or TV show treatments. I'd never thought I'd find myself giving a shit about some blind dude in a dumb red costume or She-Hulk, but hey, here I am. Marvel took risks, and I really have to admire them for that. They had faith in delivering brilliant and passion-filled films, and the effort really shows. None of them feel like cash grabs, even though Marvel is definitely aware that anything they make will make millions regardless. What I love most about the Marvel movie and TV shows is their ability to make me feel so attached to the protagonist. As I said, I never thought I'd care about Ant-Man or Star-Lord or Jessica Jones, but lo and behold, I'm happy to now call myself a fan. The Avengers and the other heroes are all fantastic, and each of them having their own films and adventures allow you to get used to them, the things they do and the way they act, and watch them develop as characters and people. It makes the moment in which they all meet up just that much more special. And seeing their interactions on the big screens and their heroics against terrifying baddies is a spectacle to watch. That, and they're all perfectly casted. I don't think any other actors could fit the roles they play anymore. It's perfection. One aspect of the MCU a lot of people take issue with is their villains. As though the villains are threatening and badass, most of the time, a lot of them lack character. This is true for most MCU villains, though there are a rare few that I do find myself liking almost as much as the heroes. There's Loki for one, the obvious choice, but another one would be Whiplash, whose endless quest for his bird is really quite admirable.
We got you the bird, pal.
This is not my bird.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Regardless, they most often serve as great counterparts to the heroes. They're good for final fights at the end of the movie at least. Not a single MCU film has ever disappointed me or left me unsatisfied. Except one, but I'll get to that. Every film delivered a fun and action-packed adventure that was both memorable and insanely enjoyable. If there's anything you can say about the Marvel movies, it's that they're entertaining. So let's go through each film individually, shall we? Because there is a lot to cover. Starting with where it all began, 10 years ago. The movie that started it all. Iron Man saw the introduction of the cocky and egotistical Tony Stark, and his journey into becoming Iron Man. This film was badass in every sense of the word. Watching Stark undergo his transformation from narcissistic weapons producer into a superhero, all while developing the eventual villain, Obadiah Stane, was great. The Iron Man suit looked fantastic, and seeing it on the big screen was incredibly exciting. It's just so beautiful. Robert Downey Jr. was such a perfect casting choice for Tony, and his charisma really brings the character to life. The final fight was kinda short, but the movie from beginning until end was just plain awesome. Iron Man started the MCU off really strong, setting the groundwork for things to come, and raised the bar quite high for future movies. I have never really liked the Hulk. I've never been a fan of his character or design, and though he's pretty cool when paired with other Marvel heroes, he's never been very interesting on his own. And unfortunately, this is true for The Incredible Hulk, the only MCU movie that I don't like. I don't think it's bad, but the film was generally unengaging, with a lot more focus on the slow-moving story than the smashing. Of course it has to be a love story. Ugh. It's one of the lowest scoring MCU films, so I assume I'm not alone in thinking this, but Hulk just wasn't for me. Iron Man 2 is a source of contention for many fans of the MCU, as it just didn't live up to the original. And while I agree with that, I still really like this movie. Seeing War Machine was great, I loved Justin Hammer as the villain, and I really enjoyed the subplot of Tony having to build a new element to prevent his arc reactor from killing him. However, the best part about it was undoubtedly Whiplash, because he wanted his bird. We got you, your bird.
This is not my bird.
What do you mean? This is your bird.
Not my bird.
Also, we got more involvement of S.H.I.E.L.D., which really hammered the idea of the Avengers actually happening. So that was cool.
Bird.
Thor was a movie I always thought was really boring, but upon rewatching it I found that I was mistaken. I really liked this movie. We get a look into the more fantasy side of Marvel for the first time, contrasting interestingly with the more realistic feel of movies like Iron Man. Asgard looked beautiful, and we spent plenty of time exploring it on the big screen. The best parts came from the fish out of water comedy, where Thor is sent back to Earth and stripped of his powers, and has to attempt to make his way back home.
Another.
Thor is a very interesting character, as is his side of the Marvel comics, and they did a fantastic job establishing both him and the Asgardians in this film. It added another side to the MCU that really showed viewers how grand this universe was going to be. Also, Hawkeye was in it. That was necessary. Captain America is another movie that I remember being kind of boring, and I have to say it kind of is a bit boring, to be honest. That doesn't mean I don't like it, but it definitely drags on more than the other MCU movies. That said, it's still a very interesting look at Steve Rogers' transformation into Captain America, and his mission to defeat Hydra and the Red Skull. Cap was a character I really struggled to like initially, but I've gained more of an appreciation for this film after watching all of the later movies. He's a very different person to the rest of the Avengers, and his origin story is certainly very different. This movie has its fun being set during World War II and keeping things relatively realistic until everything starts being about aliens and magic and all that. And speaking of, yeah baby, the Avengers is and always will be one of the coolest things ever. Seeing 5 movies culminate in one epic team up between 5 heroes and Hawkeye was just absolutely amazing. The Avengers was suitably epic, with Loki being a fantastic villain and a great foe to the Avengers themselves. It was just so great seeing the heroes all meet up and work together to defeat a bunch of scary alien dudes. This was the movie that changed everything for the MCU, and it still holds up today, even with later movies upping the stakes significantly higher. Each character gets their time to shine, and the way all the characters interact with each other, still carrying out their own motivations and way of doing things and having to put aside their differences to work as a team was just fantastic. This is, and forever will be, one of my favorite movies, simply because everything was done to perfection to create an entertaining and fantastic film. God, I can only imagine how amazing this film must have been as a comic book fan. Would have had to go through several pairs of pants. Iron Man 3 was the very first MCU movie I ever saw, back when I was too young to really understand the concept of a shared universe, and I have to say, while it wasn't a great introduction to said universe, I still really liked this movie. Iron Man 3 isn't much of an Iron Man movie, instead more of a Tony Stark movie, as we spend the film's duration watching his character grow and evolve past his mistakes. It felt a lot more human than the other two Iron Man movies, due to Tony now suffering from panic attacks following the conclusion of the Avengers. However, it still has fantastic action sequences, particularly its final battle. Killian wasn't a great character, but he was a suitable nemesis, and I admit I originally found the Extremis subjects quite terrifying. Definitely a more interesting villain for Iron Man to take on instead of big, grey Iron Man. Iron Man 3 served as a nice conclusion to Tony's character arc, but it was a damn shame we didn't get to see the return of Whiplash. Thor 2 is a movie that a majority of people say is the worst of the MCU, due to it being filled with plot holes and such, and just being generally unengaging. After rewatching it, I couldn't disagree more. Much like with the first Thor, I found myself pleasantly surprised with The Dark World. When I watched it the first time a few years ago, I fell asleep, but upon my rewatch of all of the movies, I found Thor 2 to be among my favourites of Phase 2. You know, next to all the other movies. Much like with other Phase 2 films, it upped the stakes for the hero in question, and Thor 2 expanded more upon Asgard and Thor's mythology. It was great to see more of Loki, especially seeing both he and Thor working together. And though the villains in this film were among the weakest in the MCU, at the very least we got a pretty cool final battle. And also this.
The police were called to the scene shortly after 11 AM this morning after a seemingly harmless rambler approached the area.
Going back on that point of every film feeling different, The Winter Soldier was the movie that really nailed that thought for me. This doesn't feel like a superhero movie. It feels like a badass action movie. Gone is the cheesier Cap that is still lovable but definitely overshadowed by the likes of Iron Man and Thor, and now we see this awesome and powerful Cap just smacking the shit out of everybody. The action scenes in this film are unparalleled, and Steve and Black Widow make a surprisingly great duo. We get to see a Captain America story perfectly transitioning from the original film set during the World War to a modern world, and it's done by having S.H.I.E.L.D. infiltrated by what remains of Hydra. Throw in the Winter Soldier, Cap's old partner, and you have a movie that was thrilling throughout. I was bewildered the first time I saw this film at how, I don't know, action movie-y the Winter Soldier felt. I gained a new appreciation for Cap, and it made me very excited to see more of him. Guardians of the Galaxy is probably my favorite MCU film, simply because of how vastly different it is to every other movie Marvel has to offer. Aside from the sequel, but I'll get to that. Guardians is way more fun than its predecessors, where they focus on humor and its beautiful visuals. It was the first film set off Earth, and Marvel nailed it. It's amazing how Guardians managed to establish this universe in such a short time, taking obscure and unfamiliar characters and making a beloved adventure out of it. Marvel defied expectations once again, and many people who thought the movie would be Marvel's first failure were proven wrong. Guardians has the most world building for the universe overall, what with the first proper introduction to Thanos, Chris Pratt, a view of the wider galaxy, Chris Pratt, the Infinity Stones, and Chris Pratt. It was funny, lovable, exciting, has fantastic characters, and is infinitely rewatchable. I love this movie. And also Chris Pratt. Avengers Age of Ultron did what a sequel should. It took everything great about the first film and upped the ante by tenfold. We go from watching the Avengers first meet up in the original film, and now in Age of Ultron we fast forward to them already being a team and having worked together for a while, and it was really cool seeing all of the advancements they had made together. It expanded upon the character relationships between each of the Avengers, the world around them, and introduced plenty of new characters, such as the Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. The film's villain, Ultron, I mean, who else, was a character I found incredibly interesting. And though he's no Loki, I personally found him the most intimidating villain yet, if an underdeveloped one. I admit it's a word I find myself overusing, but this movie was just epic. The action scenes were spectacular, and that's what this film is, non-stop action, as well as getting the audience incredibly excited for future films. Plus, we got that sweet Hulkbuster action. A lot of people didn't like Age of Ultron and thought it was a letdown, but I am not one of those people. Age of Ultron was a damn good time.
Language.
Shut up, Cap. Once again, raising my point about how different each of these films feel, Ant-Man tells the story of ex-criminal Scott Lang attempting to make his way back to his daughter. It was a nice change of pace from the explosive Age of Ultron, and it was nice to get another solo movie after all the team-ups. I guess you could say it was a superhero movie on a smaller scale. Ant-Man was always a really weird superhero to me, and I really couldn't see the appeal, but this film managed to use such a strange concept in insanely creative and inventive ways, and the fight scenes really show off this creativity. Yellow Jacket was a bit of a generic villain, but hey, he looked cool, and that's what matters, right? Ant-Man was a pretty different movie to what we've seen before, but that didn't mean it wasn't an enjoyable one. Mainly because I had this guy in it. He is one of the MCU's best characters. Right after Whiplash. It went back to that sort of realistic and grounded feel that the Iron Man movies had. Even if the main character shrinks down to the size of an ant, you get what I mean. After watching it, I thought I'd never look at ants the same way again. But nope, they're still disgusting. Ugh. And what came after Ant-Man? This movie. Oh, this movie. Captain America Civil War is such a fantastic film, because it deals with a very understandable conflict, and pits its two main stars against each other as they fall onto opposite sides of this issue. The Avengers blow up a lot of stuff, therefore they should be supervised and run by the government. Captain America disagrees. Cue superheroes beating the crap out of each other. Civil War gave us not only some of the best fight scenes we've seen from the MCU, pitting hero against hero in an exciting but tragic battle for who was right, but also gave us fantastic character development for almost every single one of the main characters introduced so far, as well as bringing together this cast of superheroes. That, and it gave us two surprise guests, Spider-Man and Black Panther, who would later go on to lead their own brilliant movies. Plus, we got frickin' Giant Man. You really got a feel for each side of the argument here, and the movie does a good job of making you understand why the superheroes are fighting, not just doing it for the hell of it. It's both a thrill to watch, but also emotionally draining. Being one of my favorites in the MCU, Civil War is just utterly brilliant. Okay, remember that thing I said about no Marvel movie disappointing me? Well, that's still true, because Doctor Strange didn't disappoint me, it just confused the crap out of me. The visual effects were stunning for certain, but Doctor Strange just left me feeling unsatisfied. I didn't hate it, and there wasn't necessarily anything wrong with the movie, but I expected a bit more from it. None of the characters really resonated with me, aside from the cape, but it would seem that a large number of people really like this film, so I feel like I'm missing out on something. Still, it did spawn this fantastic video, so that's great. This is what hell looks like. I think Doctor Strange will be one of those movies I like a lot more upon further rewatch, but for now it probably sits at the bottom of the MCU for me. Still better than Hulk. I was initially very worried about Guardians 2 because I thought there was no way in hell they could pull off a sequel as good as the original, but Marvel damn well proved me wrong. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was an amazing movie that provided a lot more emotional depth for all of the characters, as we watch each of the Guardians solve their own personal conflicts throughout the film, before culminating with the final battle against Peter's father, Ego, who was one of the most unique villains we've seen in a Marvel movie yet. It was a movie in which we get to know the characters a lot better, and that was great, because there was nothing more I wanted to do than spend more time with this brilliant cast. Yes, Baby Groot was pretty cute, but my new favorite character in the movie was Mantis, who was just so gosh darn adorable. As I said, there were a lot more emotional moments in it, such as Star-Lord discovering the truth about his mother's death, and Nebula and Gamora resolving their differences. It was heavily character focused, more so than the first Guardians, and it was just sensational. It didn't disappoint with it, another fantastic soundtrack, great action scenes, and just looked absolutely gorgeous. I mean, look at that. Guardians 2 is how a sequel should be. I have a confession to make. I don't like the original 3 Spider-Man movies, and I think the Sony ones are okay. Yes, I don't like Tobey Maguire, but I was okay with Andrew Garfield. Not a very popular opinion, I know. But I was so thrilled when Spider-Man showed up in Civil War, because I knew that if there was anything that could make a really good Spider-Man movie, it would be the MCU. Spider-Man's always been one of the most appealing Marvel heroes to me, and I am pleased to say that Homecoming knocked it out of the park. The young and clumsy Peter Parker made for some hilarious moments, and I absolutely love him and his awkwardness. It was a smaller adventure suited to a smaller superhero, and it served as a brilliant introduction to this version of Spidey. Seeing he and Tony's teacher-student relationship was great, and it was just nice to see something different being done with Spider-Man instead of the 10 billionth origin story. Thor Ragnarok was the movie that made me truly fall in love with Thor's character. It was a bit of a change of pace for the Thor franchise, but the decision to change Thor into essentially a Guardians of the Galaxy movie was one that worked surprisingly well. This is one of the funniest MCU movies, and also one of the prettiest. From one moment it had me laughing my ass off, and then another where I sat in awe of how fantastic it looked. Complete with a threatening villain and amazing banter between Banner and Thor, Ragnarok is a very weird movie, but a strangely successful one, and it made me incredibly excited for this change of pace for future movies. Man, it must suck to be Thor though. Black Panther was a film that exceeded all expectations, smashing box office records across the board and being critically acclaimed from almost every source. I have to say though, to be honest, I thought it was pretty average. And that's one of the MCU's biggest issues. Most of the movies are of such high quality that anything slightly below that is considered average. Black Panther was an enjoyable movie certainly, albeit a predictable and stale one compared to the other MCU films. My statement about no Marvel movie disappointing me, except Hulk, still remains true, but Black Panther was the first film where I really just didn't feel blown away. But regardless of that, it was still a pretty fun time. Getting to explore Wakanda was cool, and the action scenes were still fantastic. However, there was one really big thing about it that I didn't like. What are those? Yeah, scratch that, this movie's worse than Hulk. And that covers all the movies. Holy crap, there's so many. Okay, now the Netflix shows. No. I'm gonna try and be as brief as I can with this, because the video is already like 20 minutes too long. But I love all 5 of the currently available Netflix shows. Few shows have grasped me like these series have, and all of their plots were filled with intrigue and suspense, with memorable characters and stellar action, particularly in Daredevil and Jessica Jones. I never thought I'd consider myself a fan of Daredevil. I always thought he was really dumb. He looks dumb, his powers are dumb, and his 2003 movie was dumb. But after watching through Netflix's Daredevil series, I can happily say that Daredevil is now one of my favorite superheroes. And Iron Fist was garbage, is what most people say about that show. I disagree. Can I say that now? Is that allowed? I can see why people didn't like it, as it wasn't perfect, but I still really enjoyed it. Almost as much as the other series, in fact. And of course, the Defenders series, in which all 4 meet up and kick ass, was just fantastic. I admit I found myself almost as excited as I was during the Avengers to watch these 4 crossover. Though these shows don't have the massive budgets that the MCU movies have, what they do have over the films is way more time to develop the cast, and as a result they house much more interesting and complex heroes and villains. They're fantastic shows on their own, and it only adds to the fun that they get to be a part of the MCU. I do still appreciate the nods to the other Marvel properties in these shows, but I do wish there was more of them. I guess it's to ensure that the likes of Iron Man don't overshadow these smaller superheroes, so we get what we get. And you know what's ironic about that? I have never seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yep, I've been meaning to do it for ages, but I know, I am a disappointment. There's also a ton of other mini-series and tidbits that fit into the MCU, but I admit I haven't seen them yet. Yes, I know, I'm bad at this. I'm not trying to act like I'm some Marvel movie expert, but I did get 91% on an MCU online trivia quiz. So, what matters is that these properties exist. It goes to show the extent to which Marvel is keeping the cinematic universe going, and all of the stories they are able to tell within it. Marvel has transcended expectations with their cinematic universe. It's no longer about seeing your favorite childhood superheroes on the big screen, or the flashy special effects. The Marvel Cinematic Universe delivers one of the most consistently epic, entertaining, and enjoyable stories I have ever had the joy of witnessing. And I absolutely can't wait to see more. If you had told anyone years ago that we get a movie where Iron Man and Spider-Man fight Giant Man in an airport in a Captain America movie, you'd probably be considered insane. But now look. I don't like to do videos on things that haven't finished yet, but when it comes to the MCU, I know for sure that Marvel will continue to deliver fantastic films that will always impress and excite me. Also, because the MCU will never end at this rate. They're planning like a million movies already. Freaking money-grubbing Disney. Infinity War is going to be devastating, and I could not be more excited to see it. We've spent 10 years leading up to it, and it's going to be one hell of a movie. Now, unfortunately, spoilers will run rampant for this film, because people suck. So I propose one method of combating that. False spoilers. Because I know the comment section is going to be filled with assholes who spoil the movie, I want you to go mad with fake spoilers in the comment section. Spread as many lies as possible to drown out the actual spoilers to the movie. Man, I really enjoyed Infinity War, but that scene where Iron Man and Captain America make out for about 10 minutes was a bit weird. Man, I can't believe Thanos killed Quicksilver. Again, thank you Marvel Studios for 10 years of brilliant movies. Here's to even more. Can't wait for Infinity War to trot all over my feelings. Ah, damn it.